All right, class. We are going to learn about rhythm or movement. It's a principle that's designed to help make a composition where your eye is moving all around the image. Kinesthetic empathy just means that when you have a visual experience, it stimulates other senses. So when you look, when you, it 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 stimulates like the sense of movement, and that we can feel our body moving, or we can hear it, like we can hear a rhythm. And so visual rhythm can reflect musical rhythm. It will give a sense of something similar to a musical rhythm. So we look at this Birchfield painting. It's called the Insect Chorus. You can see there's a lot of different rhythm in here. There is, when I look at this part, I hear like a louder, like kind of bang. And I can't really do that on my desk very well. But as it goes up, it gets lighter and lighter. Or maybe it goes down and gets louder and louder. Something through here maybe feels more jazz like. In this bush here, these feel like almost like pings, loud, sharp noises. So the way he's created line, we can start imagining sound. Kandinsky, he was one of the very first abstract, or not abstract really, which we'll talk about that, non-representational artwork. And this is in your assignment, you're going to need to know, you're going to need to make non-representational. And so abstract art is art that is abstract art is art that has a visual reference. Visual meaning you're looking at the sun, looking at a tree, but then it's been abstracted. It's been distorted in some way. So it's not realistic, but it's not, you still have some kind of reference. Non-representational artwork means there is no visual reference. Everything is from your imagination, but even though it's from your imagination, you still don't add things in. So you can make something abstract from your imagination. You can make a drawing of a person or a sun or mountains. But in this case, everything you draw has no reference to the visual world. Kandinsky, in his paintings, he would reference music. So he would listen to classical music, and then he would paint and draw related to that, and he would use the sounds would then create motivation or inspiration to create shapes and color, and then that's how he would compose his paintings. So even though he had that reference of music, it's not a visual reference, so it's considered non-representational. So in the assignment we're going to do, you're going to make non-representational work, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in another slideshow. Okay, so what is visual rhythm? Visual rhythm is a clear repetition of elements that are the same or slightly modified, similar to a musical beat or repeated dance move. So when you listen to music, there's a similar beat that moves throughout the song, and there's multiple ones. Or if you watch a dance, there's similar moves that are repeated. So just like in those art forms, visual art forms need something that is consistent over and over. Some images, that consistency will be very clear. Some, like this last one, are kind of all over the place. There are definitely images or things repeated, like lines repeated, shapes repeated, but it's a lot more chaotic. Okay. And another term for rhythm is movement. And this is really the movement of the eye across the image. This is really important. If your eye isn't moving, your eye's not looking at everything, and it's going to be a boring composition. So you really, really want movement across the image. Okay. So here is Bridget Riley. she has these waving lines, and they're repeated over and over. They transform. As they transform, they almost like ripples in a fabric or water, and you see this movement and you see this repetition. So as they go, they kind of change just a little bit, so it's like waves. Here is a photograph, and the tree is repeated over and over, this tree form. Again, they're a little bit different, and so the repetition doesn't have to be the exact same shape. They can be transformed a little bit over and over. And our eye is moving like a beat on each one, doot, 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 and then backwards all the way into the fog. And it really moves our eye from forward, back, and then back around. And we look at the whole image that way. This is a non-representational image, but that square is repeated over and over and over, so that square also creates unity, right? So a lot of times movement is part of unity, but it's more specified that it creates repetition and it creates your eye moving around. It's your eyes moving. As the squares get bigger, we get more variety, and then those little bits of color down there also create variety. Okay, so legato is a type of rhythm, and it's a musical term meaning connecting and flowing rhythm in music. So it's just how movement, if there's movement that is connected to everything rather than separated. So if you look here, it's this image, these shapes are connected to each other. The one down here and then the ones up here. And what our eye does is it swoops. And so that movement is all connected, and it just brings us from one spot to the next. Here's another, it's a manuscript from the 1500s, and that's what the words do, right? They're all connected to each other, bringing our eye around and around and around and around. Alternating rhythm is more rhythm that is the same thing over and over and over and over. So the very simple alternating rhythm would be something we did like in kindergarten, like square, triangle, square, triangle, square, triangle, square, triangle. Here's a more complicated one. It's the same thing repeated over and over, but it's like this big cube shape that's interconnected, and sometimes it's a cube, but sometimes it looks like you're looking inside a cube or a room, but it's repeated. So like if you go up here, this shape is repeated, and this shape, then shape, this shape, then this shape, and this shape, and this shape. Same here, this shape, this shape, this shape, this shape. So all of this is repeated exactly the same, and so that's why it's called alternating rhythm. There's no variation in the repetition. There's variation in each shape that's repeated. Not each shape is the same. It's not square, 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 but the repetition stays the same. Progressive rhythm is a series of shapes that get bigger or smaller as you repeat. So this is a artichoke heart, and the bigger ones over here get smaller, smaller, go down, get smaller and smaller. So it changes size. This is another example of that, right? So the man gets smaller. The man is like rain. It's coming down, and it gets smaller as you go back into space. Or it gets bigger as you go forward into space. Polyrhythmic structure is that more kind of a little bit chaotic structure where there's several rhythmic patterns to produce a complex result. And so if we look here, there's repetition here, there's repetition here. Some repetition is not as, like this shape is mostly the same. This shape here is mostly the same. But there's also like curved lines here and here and here that were repeated. There's sharp angles that are repeated. There's curves here that are repeated. There. And so there's a lot of different structures within each other. And this non-representational art has that a lot. Here's another example of that. So there is so much going on, and sometimes art like can overwhelm people, or it may feel chaotic, though that is usually part of the process or part of the artist's goal. But when you look at it, there is some kind of system. So it's not that they just threw stuff on the canvas and they weren't paying attention to the system at all. There usually is a system, and there's repetition within that system. So you can see if you go this direction, diagonal, there's a lot of lines going this way that is repeated. And then there's some lines that throw you off that are going the opposite direction, right here and right here and right here. And then there's black shapes that are repeated. There's color that's repeated, the blues and the greens. And so there's little tiny marks that are repeated all over the place. And so these things kind of pull the whole image together to make it feel finished. Oh, we're not going to do that. Okay, so the next slideshow I'm going to talk about the difference between representational and abstract to clarify. And then you are going to draw a non-representational art design using rhythm or movement. And then you're going to add color to that image, but we will talk about that later, maybe next class, so that, I don't know, maybe do a Zoom meeting about it, but we will talk about that later. So we'll just do one step at a time. So we're going to do a movement drawing that is non-representational. All right. Talk to you guys later.